My name is Jessica, I'm 34 years old, and I built an $8 million company from scratch to support my family. But one morning, I walked into my bank and was told something that nearly broke me. My parents had given away my shares, without even asking me. Betrayal doesn't even begin to describe it. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about family drama and emotional courage. I never imagined my downfall would begin in such an ordinary place, the local branch of the bank I had visited 100 times before. That morning, the air smelled of fresh coffee and polished tile floors, the kind of scent that usually calms me. I stood in line, scrolling through my phone, thinking about payroll and supplier calls. It was routine. Just another day of making sure my company, the one I had poured 12 years of my life into, kept running smoothly. When my name was called, I walked up to the counter with a smile. "Morning, Tom," I said, recognizing the same teller I'd dealt with countless times. He looked at me strangely, like he was about to say something uncomfortable. That's when I first felt the shift, the uneasy silence that clings to your skin before bad news. "I'm sorry, Jessica," he said, lowering his voice. "You don't have access to this account anymore." I blinked, half convinced I'd misheard him. "What do you mean I don't have access? This is my company's account." His eyes darted to the screen and back to me. "Ownership was transferred last week. Your parents are listed as the primary holders now." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. My heart pounded so loud I swore other people in line could hear it. I leaned against the counter, trying to steady myself. "That's not possible. I didn't sign anything. I didn't authorize anything." Tom's face softened, but his voice was firm. "All I can tell you is what's on the system. The paperwork is on file." My hands shook as I shoved my ID back into my purse. I didn't want to cause a scene in front of strangers, but every step toward the exit felt like walking through water. My legs were heavy. My throat burned. And in my chest, there was this sinking, twisting ache I couldn't describe. The drive home felt endless. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Every red light gave me too much time to think about the 12-hour days, the skipped vacations, the times I told myself it was okay to sacrifice dating, friendships, and even sleep because family comes first. I had built this company for them. Every brick, every contract, every client, I carried it on my shoulders. And now, the very people I trusted most had stripped it away in silence. When I finally walked through the front door of my parents' house, the smell of roast chicken hit me. My mom was in the kitchen humming like nothing was wrong. My dad sat in the living room, watching the news, glasses balanced on his nose. It was too normal. That made it worse. I didn't waste time. "What did you do with my company?" My voice cracked halfway through, and I hated the weakness in it. My dad muted the TV and glanced at me like I was overreacting. "We didn't do anything to your company, Jessica. We secured its future." "By stealing it from me?" My voice rose. Mom turned, wiping her hands on a towel, her face calm. "We didn't steal it. We just transferred the shares. It's still in the family. You should be grateful." Grateful. That word cut deeper than anything else. I took a shaky step closer. Grateful? I gave up my 20s building this. I missed birthdays, weddings, life, so that we could have something. And you didn't even ask me? Dad sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "You were too emotional to keep running it long term. This was the responsible choice. We've given your shares to your brother. He'll handle things better." For a moment the room spun. My brother. The same brother who once called the business a waste of time. The same brother who never stayed long at a job, who borrowed money he never paid back. That's who they trusted over me? "Jessica," Mom said softly, almost like she pitied me. "This way, you can finally take a break. Start a family. Live a normal life. Isn't that what you wanted?" I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the only way to keep from screaming. A normal life? You think I built an $8 million company just to hand it over like some casserole dish? Neither of them flinched. That's when I realized. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't temporary. They had planned it. They had signed papers behind my back, probably justifying it with words like responsibility and family. I felt something inside me crack that night. It wasn't just the company I lost. It was the illusion that my parents saw me as anything more than a tool. After hours of arguing, crying, and slamming doors, I ended up back in my apartment, sitting in the dark with only the hum of the refrigerator for company. I replayed every word in my head, every dismissive look, every excuse they made. I wanted to storm back in, to tear the papers apart, to demand what was mine. But another voice inside me whispered something different. Be quiet. Watch. Learn. That voice won. Over the next few days, I went through the motions like a ghost. I made coffee. I went for runs. I answered texts with one-word replies. But inside, I was unraveling. Every reminder of the company, emails from old clients, invoices waiting to be signed, was like salt in an open wound. I didn't tell friends. I didn't post online. I couldn't bear the thought of explaining how the people I loved most had betrayed me in the most calculated way possible. Instead, I carried it silently, like a secret no one could see. But in that silence, something else began to grow. A quiet determination. If they thought I was too emotional, too weak, too soft, they were wrong. They hadn't destroyed me. They had freed me. And in that strange, twisted freedom, a plan began to take root. I sat there in the dark for hours that night, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence like background noise in a life I no longer recognized. I wasn't crying anymore. The tears had dried, leaving behind a hollow ache in my chest. I remember staring at the window, the streetlight outside casting faint orange patterns on my living room wall, and thinking, so this is what it feels like to be erased. The next morning, I didn't wake up with rage or fire in my chest. Instead, it was an emptiness, like the world had dimmed its colors overnight. I got dressed in jeans and a sweater, grabbed a cup of coffee, and walked outside as if nothing had happened. The neighbors waved. Mrs. Miller asked about my parents, like she always did. I smiled and said, "They're doing well." My voice was steady, but inside I was crumbling. Without the company, my days suddenly felt meaningless. I wasn't heading to the office. No meetings, no contracts waiting for my approval, no phone calls lined up before lunch. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a blank notepad in front of me. The silence was unbearable. Bills still came though. Life doesn't pause just because your heart breaks. I needed income, something, anything to keep going. That's how I ended up taking a job at a local bookstore downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet, steady, and nobody asked questions about my past. Customers came in looking for novels, cookbooks, sometimes greeting cards. I learned how to work the register, restock shelves, and keep small talk to a minimum. The strange part was how invisible I felt there. People walked past me every day without knowing who I was, or what I had once built. Some even mentioned my old company in passing. I heard that family business is doing well, one customer said cheerfully while buying a magazine. I forced a smile and nodded, my heart twisting like a knife had been pushed deeper. At home, the silence grew heavier. I stopped answering calls from relatives because I couldn't bear the false cheer in their voices. Social media became unbearable. My brother posting pictures of company dinners, my parents smiling in boardrooms. It felt like a deliberate parade of ownership, as if they were celebrating how easily they had pushed me aside. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing. I replayed old memories. Late nights in the garage when the business was just an idea, the excitement of landing our first client, the pride in my parents' eyes when I handed them their first dividend check. Now those same faces looked at me with cold dismissal. The silence in my apartment echoed with every broken promise. One evening, I ran into an old friend, Dana, at the grocery store. She hugged me tightly, her eyes lighting up. "Jess, it's been forever. How's the company going?" My throat tightened. I forced a casual laugh. "Oh, busy as always." She didn't notice the tremor in my voice, but the moment she turned the corner with her cart, my smile collapsed. I stood frozen in the aisle, staring at a row of cereal boxes, feeling like a liar in my own life. The truth was, I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone. Not yet. It wasn't shame exactly, it was something deeper. A wound that hadn't stopped bleeding, a betrayal too big to put into words. Talking about it would make it real, and I wasn't ready for that. So I stayed quiet. Days turned into weeks. The bookstore became a routine I clung to. I liked the smell of paper and ink, the soft murmur of customers browsing, the faint music playing from the overhead speakers. It was ordinary, and maybe that was what I needed. Ordinary felt safer than ambition. Ordinary didn't ask me to give everything away, but the silence followed me even there. Some afternoons, I'd catch myself staring out the front window, watching traffic go by, wondering how my life had shifted so dramatically. I used to be the woman making decisions worth millions. Now I was bagging mystery novels and handing out receipts. The contrast was dizzying. One night, after closing up the shop, I walked to my car and found a note slipped under the windshield wiper. At first, I thought it was junk mail. But when I opened it, my breath caught. It was handwritten, short and sharp. They don't deserve you. Don't let them win. No name. No signature. Just those words. I stood under the streetlight clutching the note, my pulse racing. Someone knew. Someone saw what I couldn't say out loud. For the first time in weeks, I felt less alone. That note became my secret companion. I tucked it into my journal and read it whenever the silence threatened to swallow me. It didn't solve anything, but it reminded me there were eyes on me, maybe even people rooting for me. Still, the quiet days stretched on. I didn't call my parents. I didn't visit. Holidays came and went with awkward texts but no gatherings. My family had their victory, and I had my silence. Yet within that silence I noticed small shifts in myself. I stopped crying every night. I began jogging in the mornings again, headphones in, breathing deep in the cool air. I started sketching ideas in my notepad, not for anyone else, not for a company, just for me. They were half-baked thoughts, scribbles about business models, little sparks of creativity I thought I'd lost. I didn't act on them, not yet. But the silence, as crushing as it was, had given me space to think. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole. But I was no longer broken in the same way. The silence wasn't just punishment anymore. It was becoming something else. A pause. A cocoon. And though I didn't realize it fully then, inside that quiet, something new was slowly beginning to grow. I didn't notice it at first, the tiny shift inside me. It was subtle, like the first breeze after a long storm. One evening, I pulled out that same notepad where I'd scribbled nonsense during my quiet nights, and instead of half-formed doodles or bitter lines, I found myself sketching an actual idea. It wasn't much, just a few notes about local suppliers I'd once worked with, and a thought about what people were missing in the market. But it was the first spark I had felt in months. For a long time, I stared at those scribbles. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity. What was I doing, starting again from nothing? But another part whispered, why not? You've done it before. The next morning, I went back to the bookstore as usual, but my steps felt lighter. I tucked the notepad into my bag, almost like a secret weapon. Between customers, I jotted down names, numbers, and half-formed strategies. It wasn't much, but it was a start. One slow afternoon, as I was stacking a pile of cookbooks, I heard a familiar voice. Jessica. I turned and my heart skipped. It was Mark, one of my old employees. The kind who had stayed late without being asked. The kind who believed in the company before it had even proven itself. He grinned, shaking his head. I almost didn't recognize you. I forced a smile. Yeah, I've been keeping a low profile. His eyes softened. I heard what happened. People talk, you know. I didn't want to believe it. My chest tightened. For weeks, I had avoided conversations like this, but with Mark, it felt different. He wasn't judging me. He was just there. We grabbed coffee after my shift, sitting in the corner of a small cafe. Mark leaned forward. Listen, Jess, you built something incredible once. Don't let them take that from you. If you ever start something new, call me. I'd follow you in a heartbeat. His words stayed with me long after I drove home. That night, I pulled out the notepad again, this time writing with purpose. I listed strengths, weaknesses, resources I still had, even if small. It felt like planting seeds in dry soil. Money, of course, was the biggest obstacle. My savings had thinned, and the bookstore paycheck barely covered rent and groceries. Still, I started setting aside $20 here, $50 there. I cut out luxuries, No takeout, no impulse buys, no extras. Every penny went into a small envelope I labeled Second Chance. Weeks turned into months, and the envelope grew thicker. It wasn't much, but watching it fill gave me hope. One Saturday morning, I drove out to a local farmer's market. Not for groceries this time, but for inspiration. I wandered past stalls of honey, handmade candles, fresh bread, all run by people who believed in what they sold. Their faces lit up when customers stopped by. That feeling, that spark of connection, I missed it more than anything. At one stall, I struck up a conversation with a woman selling handmade soaps. Her name was Linda, and she had started in her garage, just like I once had. We talked for almost an hour about suppliers, packaging, and customer loyalty. By the time I left, I had her business card in my pocket and a strange, buzzing energy in my veins. That night, I stayed up past midnight, sketching out product ideas and service models. It wasn't about competing with my family, not yet. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't finished, that I still had something to give. But the fear lingered too. Every time I wrote something down, a voice in my head whispered, "What if you fail this time? What if they were right about you?" I pushed through it. Slowly, carefully, I kept building. One evening, I shared my scribbles with Dana, the same friend I had lied to in the grocery store months earlier. We sat on her porch with glasses of iced tea, the summer air heavy with crickets. "Jess," she said, flipping through the pages, "this is good. Really good. You have to do this." Her encouragement steadied me. For the first time, I spoke the truth out loud. "They gave everything to my brother, Dana. They didn't think I could handle it. They thought I was too fragile." Dana's eyes hardened. "Fragile? You built that company from nothing. If anything, you were the backbone. Let them think what they want. You know who you are." Hearing those words was like a spark catching fire. For months, I had lived in silence, swallowing the pain. Now little by little, I felt a voice returning. By fall, I had enough in my second chance envelope to take a small risk. I rented a tiny shared office space downtown. Nothing fancy, just one desk and a window that overlooked a busy street. When I unlocked the door for the first time, my hands trembled, but my heart beat steady. I brought in a second-hand chair, my old laptop, and a whiteboard. That was it. No fanfare. No ribbon cutting. Just me and the quiet determination I'd carried for months. From that little office, I started reaching out, old contacts, vendors, clients who remembered me. Not everyone responded, but a few did. Enough to plant the seeds of something real. One afternoon, as I was sketching ideas on the whiteboard, I caught my reflection in the glass. My hair was pulled back, my eyes tired, but there was a fire there I hadn't seen in a long time. I smiled at myself, small but genuine. This wasn't about revenge yet. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about reclaiming the part of me I thought I'd lost. The silence that once suffocated me had become my soil. And now, at last, something was beginning to grow. I still remember the first whisper I heard about them. It was a chilly October morning, and I had just settled into my rented office with a mug of lukewarm coffee when my phone buzzed. The message was from an old supplier. "Hey Jessica, are you still working on new projects? Just curious, because your family's company is late on payments. Things okay over there?" For a moment, I just stared at the screen, rereading the words. My parents, the people who once prided themselves on paying early to earn trust, were late? It didn't make sense. I typed back something vague, but my fingers trembled. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every boardroom conversation I'd once been part of. My father always preached discipline. My mother handled relationships with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. If they were slipping now, it meant something was unraveling. Weeks later, I saw the first public crack. A headline in the local business section. "Family-owned empire faces supplier disputes." I clipped the article, my hands shaking as I read. Angry vendors, delayed shipments, rumors of internal conflict. My brother's name was mentioned. Apparently, he had taken over day-to-day operations. I could almost hear his voice, cocky and careless. "Relax, Jess, I've got this." But clearly he didn't. At first, I felt a surge of vindication. Then, almost immediately, guilt. They were still my family. Watching their downfall shouldn't have thrilled me. And yet, deep inside, a quiet satisfaction stirred. One evening, Dana dropped by my apartment with Chinese takeout. She tossed the paper bag on the table and grinned. "So, have you seen the news? Looks like karma finally checked their calendar." I shot her a look. "Don't say that." "What?" "I'm just pointing out facts. You warned them for years, Jess. You built systems, you created loyalty. They thought they could cut you out and keep everything running? Please." Her words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they rang true. I had spent months buried in silence, teaching myself not to care. And now the universe was dragging me back into their storm whether I wanted it or not. By December, the cracks had widened. A client I once secured called me out of the blue. His tone was careful, almost embarrassed. "Jessica, I don't know what's happening over there, but your family's team isn't returning calls. Orders are wrong, deadlines are missed. If you ever go independent, I'd be interested." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Thank you," I said softly. "I'll keep that in mind." After we hung up, I sat in my little office staring out the window at the winter streets below. Snow fell in lazy spirals, coating everything in white. I thought about the empire I had once given everything to build, now crumbling under hands that never knew how to nurture it. I didn't dance with joy. I didn't cry. I just felt a strange mixture of grief and inevitability, like watching a house burn down that you once called home, knowing you left the stove on, but no one listened when you tried to warn them. The holidays arrived, and with them, the dreaded family dinner. I almost didn't go, but something in me wanted to see the truth up close. When I walked into my parents' house, the air was heavy, tense. The dining room table, once overflowing with laughter and polished silver, felt colder, quieter. My mother forced a smile, but her eyes darted nervously. My father's shoulders sagged in a way I had never seen before. My brother, of course, acted as if nothing was wrong. He launched into stories about new ventures, exciting opportunities, and how the downturn was temporary. I sat across from him, picking at mashed potatoes, listening to the cracks in his confidence. Finally, I couldn't hold back. "Are you late on payments to vendors?" I asked, my voice steady but sharp. The table froze. My father cleared his throat. "That's not a topic for dinner." "But it's true, isn't it?" I pressed. The article in the paper wasn't lying. My brother slammed his fork down. "Don't act like you know everything, Jessica. You left. You don't get to sit here and judge." I met his glare without flinching. "I didn't leave. I was pushed out. And now you're learning why systems matter. Why relationships matter." Silence wrapped around us. My mother's hands trembled as she reached for her wine glass. My father closed his eyes, like he wished he could disappear. I excused myself before dessert, driving home in the icy night, my chest pounding. That confrontation wasn't victory, it was confirmation. They were spiraling, and denial had them by the throat. Over the next few months, their decline sped up. Rumors spread faster. Key staff quit. Competitors swooped in. One afternoon, as I walked past a newsstand, I saw another headline. "Once thriving company faces lawsuits amid mounting losses." I bought the paper and sat on a park bench to read it. People hurried past me with shopping bags and coffee cups, unaware that I was sitting in the middle of my family's collapse. A strange calm settled over me. I had begged them to listen. I had built a foundation strong enough to weather storms. They tore it down in their rush to prove me unnecessary. And now, they were the ones drowning. Back in my office, I pinned the article to my corkboard. Not as a trophy, not as revenge, but as a reminder. That arrogance destroys, that neglect corrodes, and that silence, my silence, had protected me long enough to see the truth unfold. For the first time, I realized something important. Their decline wasn't my burden anymore. It was theirs alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was the justice I had been waiting for. When I left my office that evening, the newspaper article still pinned on my corkboard, I felt lighter than I had in years. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint smell of rain. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't consumed by bitterness or grief. Instead, I felt clarity. My revenge, I realized, didn't need to be loud. It didn't need shouting matches, lawsuits, or dramatic confrontations at family dinners. The sweetest revenge was already happening, quiet, steady, undeniable. I still had contacts, people who trusted me, people who remembered the long nights I'd spent sitting in warehouses double-checking orders, or the calls I took at midnight to reassure a client things would be fine. Slowly they started reaching out. Some were cautious at first. Others were bolder. "Jessica," one of them said over coffee, "we only stayed with your family's business out of loyalty to you. When you left, it felt different. We'd rather work with someone who actually cares." Those words sank deep. I didn't beg for their contracts. I didn't even pitch myself aggressively. I just listened, nodded, and promised that if they chose to trust me, I wouldn't let them down. One by one, they shifted their accounts over. Quietly, discreetly, no press releases or big announcements. My little office, once so bare, started to fill with energy. New binders, busier calendars, Dana fielding calls with her cheerful but sharp efficiency. Meanwhile, the news about my parents' company grew darker. Layoffs. Lawsuits. A failed merger attempt. I never gloated publicly, but every time I read another article, I thought back to that night around the dinner table, my brother's defiance, my father's silence, my mother's trembling hands. I didn't need to scream. I told you so. Life was already screaming it for me. The most surreal moment came one afternoon when I walked into a downtown networking event. My brother was there, standing near the bar, his suit wrinkled, his smile forced. He spotted me instantly. For a moment, I thought he might ignore me, but instead, he walked over. "Jess," he said, his tone flat. "You're doing well, I hear." I sipped my sparkling water, meeting his eyes. "I'm managing." His jaw tightened. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Some of our clients, they've moved to you." I tilted my head slightly. Maybe they just wanted someone who returns their calls. His face flushed, but he didn't argue. He just straightened his jacket and walked away. Watching his back retreat into the crowd, I didn't feel anger. I felt free. That night, as I sat at my desk, I thought about what revenge really meant. I used to picture dramatic moments, standing in a courtroom, exposing lies, reclaiming what was mine in front of everyone. But now, I understood something simpler. My revenge was living well, building quietly, and letting their own arrogance destroy them. Dana noticed it too. One evening, as we locked up the office, she grinned. "You know what the best part is?" she asked. "What?" "You don't even have to lift a finger against them. You're just existing. And that's enough to undo everything they thought they had." I laughed, the sound surprising me. Guess silence speaks louder than shouting. Still, there were moments of temptation. When my parents' name came up in conversations, I wanted to tell the whole story. The betrayal, the shares handed over without my consent, the humiliation. But each time, I stopped myself. Not out of fear, but out of choice. Their decline was their legacy, not mine. Instead, I focused on shaping my own. I expanded carefully, not rushing like they once did. I hired people who reminded me of myself when I started. Hungry, careful, eager to learn. I treated them with respect, asked for their opinions, celebrated their small wins. It wasn't about building another empire. It was about building something honest, something steady, something mine. Months turned into a year, and the differences between us couldn't have been clearer. Their company's name was now synonymous with failure, while mine was slowly earning quiet respect. One late afternoon, as sunlight spilled through my office blinds, I received an email from a former executive who had once sided against me. His words were short, almost sheepish. "Jessica, I regret not standing by you. If you're open to it, I'd like to work together again." I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath. It wasn't just about winning back connections. It was about watching the cycle complete itself. My quiet revenge wasn't just their downfall. It was the proof that integrity lasts longer than greed, that patience outlives pride, that silence can cut sharper than shouting ever could. The final test came when I ran into my parents at a community fundraiser. They looked older, wearier. My father's handshake lacked its old firmness. My mother's smile faltered as soon as she saw me. "Jessica," she said softly, almost pleading. You've done well. I studied her face, searching for the pride I once craved, but finding only regret. Thank you, I replied simply. We stood there in silence, the weight of years between us. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to ask why. I didn't need an apology. Their decline was answer enough. Later that night, as I walked home under the city lights, I realized the truth. Revenge didn't have to be destructive. Sometimes the quiet path, the choice to live better, to rise without shouting, to succeed without vengeance, was the most powerful form of justice. And in that silence, I finally found my peace.